up? It's Big Jack Films here, and welcome back to the King Kong review series. As you guys all know, I love everything with giant gorillas and monsters destroying cities. But since day one of starting season 4, a lot of people have been requesting me to take a look at a recent video game-based movie that actually came out last year. And of course, it stars a giant gorilla, a giant werewolf, a giant crocodile, and a giant rock. Well, bottom line, it's a video game-based movie known as Rampage. For those who may not know, Rampage is a classic arcade game featuring giant monsters attacking cities as tribute to the iconic kaijus of cinema, like Godzilla, King Kong, and the werewolf from the fan film Godzilla vs. the Wolfman?
What the fuck?
Now, I have already covered the NES version of the game in my King Kong video games review, and as you can imagine, with the kaiju and video game genres getting a large amount of money thrown at them in Hollywood lately, it only seems natural like a game such as this would get the same treatment. Now, I don't mind requested movies once in a while, but if you would like to request a movie to a review as an opening night, or as a possible review here, you can do so by supporting us on Patreon. So, is this film worth being featured on the King Kong review series, or does it deserve the same trashing treatment as most video game adaptations? Well, let's take a look. This is Hollywood's adaptation of the video game classic, Rampage. Yeah, folks, Dr. Terawatt's got me on some new tech right now. So the story of this film adaptation of a video game that really had no story, the film opens in an exploding science lab satellite and space thingy as the station is under fire. Literally, as a lone survivor sends a set of genetic gas samples to launch towards Earth. We then cut to primatologist Davis Okol, played by American love child of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Shaquille O'Neal icon Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, an ex-Marine who keeps people at a distance but shares an unshakable bond with George. No, not that one. This George, the extraordinarily intelligent and incredibly rare albino silverback gorilla who has been in his care since he rescued the young orphan from poachers. But the rogue generic experiment crash lands in George's sanctuary and goes awry as it mutates the gentle ape into a raging creature of enormous size, causing him to escape his facilities and, well, goes on a rampage. But to make matters worse, it's soon discovered that there are other similar altered animals, including a giant wolf being pursued by an agent of the government, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, as these newly created alpha predators tear across North America, destroying everything in their path. So The Rock teams up with a discredited geneticist, played by Naomi Harris, to secure an antidote and save George from total destruction as they fight through an ever-changing battlefield, not only to halt a global catastrophe, but to stop a bigger threat the size of an Epcot-sized suitcase. So what's my take on this video game adaptation? Well, I would say, if anything, that not only is it the best video game movie I've ever seen, and trust me, I've seen plenty of Red Ring of Deaths, but I'll also say that it's probably the most expensive ripoff ever made. What do I mean by that? Well, let me recap a bit of Kong history. Back in the 1970s, when Dino De Laurentiis was producing his remake of King Kong and a massive legal rights issue came into play, other studios, most notably in Europe or Asia, decided to cash in on the giant monkey madness by producing their own King Kong films while the rights were still in question, thus creating a few cheesy yet interesting ripoffs, including the British comedy Queen Kong, Korea's 3D schlock Ape, Italy and Canada's Yeti giant of the 20th century, and of course the Shaw Brothers cult classic Mighty Peking Man. But now in recent years, with the success of the legendary MonsterVerse, Rampage, from my perspective, is more of a tribute to the monster ripoff of the 1970s rather than the current movies themselves. Hell, it was produced by the same studio producing the frickin' MonsterVerse. How is that even possible to produce your own ripoff? Were they so scared that the Asylum was gonna rip them off that they made a ripoff before the ripoff? Oh, wait. But to the point, Rampage is a loving tribute to the cult classic ripoffs of the 60s and 90s, filled with great action scenes, unprivileged visual effects, and some generic but entertaining characters. And to be honest, there's not much to say about the characters. They're literally the most generic cliche characters that we've seen a billion times before. The Rock is The Rock and Negan is Negan. Nothing changed and nothing lost. And for what it is, both characters are always fun to watch. Even the villains are as generic as the villains in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Cartoon villains out for money and to create weapons out of giant monsters and animals. Has anyone ever noticed that heroes and villains in all movies nowadays are on the level of a frickin' Captain Planet cartoon? You know, a diverse set of characters taking on a big greedy tree-dropping business folks? Whatever happened to develop characters in movies? It's almost as if all of Hollywood is trying to send a political message. Oh god, for fuck's sakes, Hollywood! Get your political agendas out of my fucking movies!
And kills his true enemy.
It's time to let old things die.
Really, who gives a shit about the human characters? The movie is called Rampage, so let's focus on the rampaging monsters themselves. Starting off with, of course, the main lead, George. And yeah, this character is really fun to watch, and the special effects really show off well in this film. George was based on a real albino gorilla known as Snowflake, and it's hard not to see that in the character. But of course, me being the King Kong guy, I see a lot of Kiko from Son of Kong in there. It doesn't help in comparison that the special effects were done by Kong 05's effects team Weta Digital, and the animators did a fantastic job that I wouldn't be surprised if many of the animation veterans on Kong 05 worked on George. There's a lot of great homages to many of the King Kong movies, but by far the most obscure yet hilarious reference is the middle finger gags George does that are straight nods to the South Korean knockoff film Ape. A nice touch there. Ralph the Wolf is also a nice add-on creature to the story, and I love the liberties the filmmakers took to make this an interesting monster by having him fly and achieve outstanding heights.
Of course, the wolf flies.
He's like the love child of the Wolfman and Varen the Unbelievable. It's just fucking amazing. But with these two giant monsters comes a greater monster with the Godzilla-sized crocodile known as Lizzie. And for the most part, it's a really intriguing design. And holy crap did they up the scale for the final boss of this movie. He's twice as big as both George and Ralph and makes for a challenging yet seemingly indestructible monster. Hell, he almost comes off as a prototype for the legendary Anguirus. And seeing the creature cause so much destruction and battle the two other monsters is a hell of a lot of fun. Speaking of which, the action scenes, while generic, have a lot of entertaining value. The special effects are great, and the fighting between the monsters is fantastic and also really brutal. I'm surprised with every entry in today's giant monster movies that they keep topping themselves with the monster kills in these movies. The way the monsters are beaten are pretty shocking, and even George gets all fucked up. I love how the climactic rampage is set in Chicago, especially the stuff with George coming off as the stuff of dreams when John Landis had planned a remake of King Kong back in the early 90s, taking place in Chicago rather than New York City. While the scene with George climbing the Sears Tower is a lot of fun, it does go over the top with The Rock gliding a chopper down on the side of the collapsing building. But that's to be expected from both The Rock and the director. Most of Brad Payton's movies are your typical summer popcorn blockbusters, but with a lot of the movies I've seen that he's done, I find them more entertaining than something Roland Emmerich would produce. Are they cliche and filled with over-the-top action scenes and special effects?
Yeah, I guess so.
But they're still hilariously fun to watch. I mean, what do you expect from the director of San Andreas, Journey to the Mysterious Island, and Cats and Dogs 2? Now, in terms of the cons in the movie, well, really there's not much to talk about here, because the movie is just a typical blockbuster with both the characters and the story itself. Really, the only thing people complain about with this film is the change in origins of the monsters. In the original game, the monsters, when they die, actually become human, implying that it was their original form before being mutated by whatever turned them into monstrous beings. However, for the movie, they're created more from genetic science and start off as animals. Really? I don't get why people would complain, because I actually find this a more realistic change that the casual movie-going audience would accept. And to be perfectly honest, guys, there's not much left to talk about this film. Overall, Rampage is a decent but bland summer blockbuster and a wonderful tribute to both the classic arcade game and the giant monster movie ripoffs of the 70s and 90s. The characters are bland, forgettable, but fun, the action scenes and creatures have outstanding entertaining material, and the special effects are impressive and really unentitled to a film like this. It's almost too good for a film like this, but it makes it work. I I will say by far this is the best video game movie I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot with so many shitty video game films we've gotten in the last 30 years. So with that said, I'll give this movie a decent 7 out of 10. It's a passable film for what it's worth, and for any monster movie, video game, or kaiju fanatics out there, I'd say it's a nice little treat. So yeah, folks, Rampage is fun and all, but it's just a typical movie that I really don't have much to talk about, and I guess this is the last King Kong knockoff I'll be taking a look at for a while. But considering it's a decent video game movie, it gets an extra life on this point. So with all the King Kong films I've tackled in almost every genre, what the hell is there left to cover? In fact, let's see what's happening next month. Well, this month is January, and next month is my birthday. I mean, what else could be going on in February? Oh my.
Scan complete. Genetic reality maker sequence now processing for operation. Incoming video call from Professor Poindexter.
Are you fucking insane?
What, you got a problem with what I'm doing?
Yes! Do you not know what type of power you're unleashing? Does Jack even know what you're doing?
Jack doesn't need to know. Besides, it's gonna be a nice little surprise for him.
Oh, Dr. Durow's gonna be pissed. You know what I do is you break the gravitational laws of reality.
That law was broken when this damn machine was created. Begin the genetic sequence.
Processing complete. Beginning sequence.
Are you sure about this?
Do it!
Hey, Buddha, have mercy on my house!